These days, headlines probably need to be reclassified for what they often are. Clickbait. If you believe this one, Nevada's U.S. Representative Mark Amodei votes against bill protecting marriage equality, which is designed to make you think that he's opposed to it, which there's more to the story, and that's usually the case. And that's why I say clickbait. The headline's supposed to get you to check it out, but often the headline is misleading, and I think that is the case here, which is why we invited Congressman Mark Amodei to join us with that and all the other fun stuff going on in Washington, D.C. I see you escaped at least for the weekend, huh?
You bet. Any chance you get to go home with the people who hired you is one that we're going to take, Dan.
Good to have you here, as always, Congressman. So this bill, repeals and replaces provisions that define, I guess, for purposes of federal law, marriage between a man and a woman, and et cetera, et cetera. But that's a pretty misleading headline. Tell me why you voted against the bill. Let's just start with that.
Well, let's start with the bill, which is a misleading bill. This was a bill that was introduced 24 hours before we voted on it. Now, we can't do anything for energy. We can't do anything for the border. We can't do anything for other parts of the economy in 24 hours if our life depended on it. But here you go. You skip it all on this, and it's a bill that was basically a solution that didn't have a problem.
Right.
This was a knee-jerk reaction to, oh, my God, maybe the Supreme Court's going to do with same-sex marriage what it did with abortion. Not that they're directly related, but, it's like... But then the other thing, Dan, is the only reason you're talking to me is because the voters of Nevada have said, Amodei, we're going to give you the responsibility. We're going to elect you to be responsible for representing us. At the same time they were doing that, Dan, they also, the voters, through the initiative process, said, here's what we want the rules in Nevada to be for same-sex marriage. There's not a problem with same-sex marriage law in Nevada, Dan. It's the law of the land in Nevada.
Right.
But nonetheless, it's like, well, here we go, 24 hours. We're going to ignore what people in Nevada did. Oh, by the way, Dan, the people in Nevada also said, here's what we want the rules to be for pro-choice versus pro-life. And so, disregard that. Disregard what they've done on same-sex marriage. Here you go, 431 people, although we're not up to full strength, who are not from Nevada are going to vote to say, thank you, Nevadans, for expressing your will in the purest democratic form possible through initiative petition and setting the rules for Nevada. And so it's not a problem here. Oh, we want to pass a bill that says, here's what the rules should be, and forget about what you people in Nevada voted for. Oh, and by the way, Dan, that's before you say, well, is the Senate going to do anything? So, of course, I'm gonna every chance I get to protect the initiative process in Nevada, which is basically the election process, I'm going to do that. That's what my press release said. I know you have a copy of it.
Yep.
And so, when you read the headlines, like, oh, Amodei votes against this, it's like, wow, somebody, I guess, in Vegas is writing the headlines. And so, I mean, in one sense, though, it's like, hey, this is business as usual in some of the media circles, and so there you go.
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about the how the newspaper business works in an actual newsroom, but if I understand it correctly, usually the writer of the story is not the person that writes the headline. That's separately done.
Right.
So you can't blame the writer. The story in the newspaper was accurate, but the headline, in my mind, wasn't. And by the way, the Supreme Court, 2013, I think it was, held that the current provisions that were in effect were unconstitutional. It seems like that should have negated everything right at that point.
Well, I think it does to anybody with a reasonable mind of thinking, regardless of what your preference is. It's like, listen, let's be really blunt here.
Okay.
This is all about trying to take people's attention away from the abysmal job that Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer and those folks have done, because there's an election here, and it's like, hey, if we can build false issues around sexual preference, around pro-choice versus pro-life, You name it. It's all about, hey, what's going on with sex? What's going on with abortion? What's going on with, who you decide you want to be in love with, instead of what the real issues are. These issues are settled in Nevada, and they're settled almost in all of them by voters. Remember how people were fired up when it's like, oh, we're going to do the House passed a national elections law. Yeah. It's like, hey, Nevada handles that. Even if we're upset with what's going on, the last thing we want is whatever the political party that's in power in D.C. telling us how to hold elections in Nevada. So let's distract, let's misrepresent, and let's do an editorial in the space of a headline. Touché.
Very similar to the Roe v. Wade to do, which here in the Silver State once again didn't change anything. We had our abortion law is in place. It's what the people wanted. It's not changing a thing here.
Changed nothing. And so I get people are very well. But what about other states and blah blah blah? And it's like, well, fine if we need to work that out, but you really want the feds in charge of it? Because if you like the way the feds are now, obviously I'm not one of those people. What about when you don't like the people who are the feds?
Mm-hmm.
It's some of that stuff they went through in the Senate. Well, we don't like what they're doing, so let's get rid of the filibuster. It's like, these worms inevitably turn.
Yeah.
And so. Thanks for kind of being on the watch for that, though, because it's one of those things where when people read the press release, they're like, oh, okay, I get that, as opposed to Amodei is opposed to what the people of the state of Nevada voted for. That nobody even mentions that.
No, I know. You and I are similar with that common sense thing. Kind of matters to us. A lot of other people could do better with that. Congressman Mark Amodei is our guest. Listen, inflation is still the number one concern most Americans have. The White House and the politicians on the left don't seem to get this. A 40-year high in inflation, the latest CPI report, and all of this seems to be eluding them. I think everything that's actually impacting Americans is eluding them at the moment. Why aren't we talking more about this?
Well, because first of all, the national press controls what they talk about. And let's be honest once again, the national media, I'm going to be as friendly as I can, appears to have a very significant lean towards the administration and Speaker Pelosi and the whole agenda that is Green New Deal and things like that.
Yeah.
So because they control that, they control what you don't hear about. And they control, like we're talking about, what you do hear about. And so, if this was a Republican administration, they'd be doing backflips on my God and inflation, and you're killing the middle class, and all that stuff that we know to be true. And why are we shooting ourselves in the foot on energy? And why is nobody on duty at the border? And it's not because of the Border Patrol, all that stuff. But instead, we get, oh my God, gas is down to, the second lowest level in the last 5 years or something like that.
Yeah, like that's a
it has nothing to do with these guys. I know it's like, well, employment's good in Nevada and stuff like that. And it's like, well, you talk to those small business owners that have been yelling at me for the last 2 weeks about we need workforce. What the heck?
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, if the whole private sector, who, by the way, Dan, let's not forget, from time to time people forget this, the private sector is the people who pay the taxes which allow us to run government. So the better the private sector's doing, the better paying taxes is doing. I don't understand this thing of, well, it's really okay and all that other sort of stuff, and it's like, it's not okay. And if these people are locking their doors and they're not paying employees and they're not providing health insurance benefits and they're not providing retirement options, then it falls to who? And we know how that works because we've just taken on a heck of a lump in the first COVID bill to get us through that, even though a lot of people who keep wanting to send in COVID bills. And it's like, you can't just keep it's. They got the cart in front of the horse. So, I guess between now and November, the more that the media can can produce the scenario they want for their team, the national media, then you know what? They're helping them all they can, and they have been for quite a while now.
Yeah, he's Congressman Mark Amodei with us on News Talk 780 KOH. When we come back, what's going on the border? Speaking of what you may not be seeing from some of the national news media, stand by. More with the Congressman coming up. It's Friday afternoon. I'm Dan Mason here on News Talk 780 KOH with our guest, Congressman Mark Amodei. Yesterday, Congressman, I had senatorial candidate Adam Laxalt on, and he told us what he saw in his trip, last weekend to the border. And I see a lot of it, and I know a lot of what's going on. But to hear some of what he described going on down there, I'm even more scared than I was. And I said this yesterday. The fentanyl problem by itself should unite everybody to do something about this, and it just doesn't seem to be the case.
Well, one of the bewildering things about this period that we're struggling through is that political agendas have totally eclipsed, hey, we need to get the policy right on some what used to be fairly common sense uniting things. And so when you concentrate on, hey, fentanyl, where it's coming from, what its effects are, and what the consequences are just in our country, it's like that's a no-brainer. And it's like, no, the political agenda is, and I don't really but it's like we want as many folks crossing the border as we can. It's like, it's not even quality. I mean this. It's just we want as many as we can get, and to heck with public safety, to heck with public health, to heck with the people who have come over previously and followed the rules. It's just open the gates, and it's not even, it's humanitarian. It's like, well, it's not humanitarian in Mexico. The Mexican government has made tremendous strides in building a middle class and doing economic development in their neighborhood. So it isn't like it was 20 years ago there. And so you're going, well, the stuff in Central America, it's like, well, let's look at that and have some sort of, we're supposed to basically have some sort of system where we administer that. And that's before you get to all the terrorists from every place else other than South and Central America, where it's like this serves no common sense purpose other than maybe somebody's idiotic thing. Well, the more people we can get across there, the more of them we think will vote for us. And when you look at the folks from Central, I mean, they are pro-faith, personal responsibility, pro-family values folks for the most part. It's like, I don't even know what they're thinking about that. So it's just, I mean, that alone should get a whole bunch of people fired, not only in the administration, but that are facilitating this from a legislative standpoint.
Well, and based on, a lot of what we're seeing, polling and even what happened in the last election, a lot of those very people they're assuming are going to be future voters are starting to turn on them. So the plan might not be working real well.
Well, and that brings you to the point where you're going, hey, the people that are most affected by it, those folks that are legitimate folks who are coming here for reasons that we can all understand, when they're starting to go, hey, this is not the policy we want to see, then you ask the geniuses that have no real connection with blue-collar America and the border, what are you doing? It's like, well, we just want the power, and we want to maintain these perceptions. Kind of like that headline. Yeah. We want people to believe the perceptions because we want the power. I mean, you look at what they've done with it, Dan. I mean, look at Speaker Pelosi. Hey, we're trading in the stock market for personal gain. And listen.
But I never talked to my husband about it.
You just wonder why people sit there and shake their heads and why they all hate D.C.
Yeah.
I mean, my God. And so you're sitting there going, well, I'm part of that, even though, and you're just, let me just put it to you this time. It's a good time to go watch Rocky or some of the Top Gun movies.
Go watch Top Gun,
where good ends up winning in the end because we're still fairly seriously involved in the middle and not the end right now.
Congressman Mark Amodei is our guest. You're out on the campaign trail. You had to be disturbed like most people are about what almost happened to Congressman Zeldin yesterday.
Well, and you know what? I mean, everybody understands that, and I think you have to lead by example. And so one of the things that I think has been a strength for us is we're available. I'm not out with a detail or an entourage or anything else like that, which I think is one of the strengths in terms of our record, our service, and just, kind of keeping things down to earth. And so you'll continue to do that, but make no mistake, there's a risk in that. And so it just adds another element of challenge. But things are what they are, and let's just continue to hope that the vast majority of people are, which I'm sure they are good people, whether you agree with them politically or not, and we need to get through this and do the right thing.
One more thing I want to get to you before we go. You're on House Appropriations, of course. What's the latest news on the 2023 budget bills? Well,
all the Republicans are going to vote against them. We voted against most of them yesterday. The first minibus. The second one we'll do next week. They will leave, as they did last time, with no Republican votes in the House, including the appropriators, and then we'll see what the Senate does when they finally engage. But, the problem there is that they did some good work, but there's nothing public or transparent about it. They don't meet like we did in markup, so you can see who voted for what and what the amendments were. So they'll engage, maybe start kind of in the committee process in August, but for the most part, when we're getting towards the end of the fiscal year in September, then they'll say, "Well, here's our deal," and we'll have to do a continuing resolution. I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah.
To get for a while, and then the end result last year, I didn't think was a bad result, and I voted for it because of that, because it was much less than the D's had wanted, and it did some good things for the troops. It did some good things for money to the border. It did some good things for us locally in terms of wildland fire, in terms of initial attack resources, and rehab stuff for the stuff that has burned. So we'll see what they come out with. But for right now, the House will have their appropriations work through the House by the end of next week with essentially no Republican votes.
It's the main issue, what it usually is, too much spending and not in the right places?
Well, yeah. Defense will be at an all-time low, and some of the domestic programs, which are, and it's not like domestic spending is evil, Dan, but the problem is a lot of it's agenda stuff to carry out agendas, like the Green New Deal and things like that, and government funding of taxpayer funding of abortions, or I should say taxpayer borrowing to support that. And so those are things. And by the way, Dan, those aren't new things.
No.
Everybody's screaming, "Oh my God!" And it's like the Hyde Amendment's like 30 years old. Wasn't a problem until recently. So anyhow, the appropriations process is out of the House. No Republican votes. We'll see what the Senate does to set up the whole conference process. Stay tuned.
All right. Congressman Mark Amodei, as always, I appreciate your time. Thanks for checking in with us.
Yep, good to talk to you, Dan. We'll be in touch.
All right, you got it. 775-852-TALK, 800-564-K.